there because I don't want to forget anything. But it's really my distinct pleasure to introduce Ru Chen, and I feel a special bond with Ru because she took my very first seminar when I arrived at Chapman, I think in 2018-19, my museum seminar. And she was a freshman in a class of juniors and seniors, and she held her own like a force of nature. And we toured all over Los Angeles. We went to different museums, we had different activities, and she bonded with this group and participated, and you would never know that she was a freshman. And that was my very first class. And then I took, and then we bonded again in the junior seminar we have, which is always a very intense kind of experience, and we were all doing it over Zoom during COVID. So that was also really special. And Ru has always had an interest in different kinds of art, video art, art and technology, and also an interest in Asian American art. And she had the opportunity to do a Getty Merrow undergraduate internship at the Chinese American Museum, and which Bella is also going to have a Getty Merrow internship right this summer. And it was just really interesting to see how her ideas developed. And so this thesis today, what's interesting about it is she first chose a different topic, but then moved into this thesis on Kunyoshi because it was an artist she couldn't let go of, that she kept coming back to as an artist that was so visually interesting to her that she, you know, at the last second was like, no, I'm gonna switch topics and go back to the artist I originally thought was a great artist. So, Ru, I'm excited to hear your work.
Before I start, I just want to give some thanks to my professors and the faculty. As Amy said, I came in as the only art history freshman, so I really didn't know what to expect, but I'm so glad. I'm so grateful that my first class was with Amy and was that museum studies class. I felt like I learned so much, and I'm just really grateful to be standing here today, and thank you for my professors and everybody. Okay. So today I'll be presenting on the later body of works of Yasuo Kuniyoshi. Yasuo Kuniyoshi is most known as a Japanese-American artist who created paintings, sketches.
I'm just going to move that off the screen. So.
Oh, no worries. Oh, sorry.
All right, go ahead.
So he was most known for his paintings and sketches and installations that related to his Asian-American identity as he lived in the United States during the Second World War. Kuniyoshi moved by himself to the United States at 16 years old, unwilling because he wanted to avoid the military school in Japan. By 1907, he had moved to Los Angeles, where he briefly studied at the Los Angeles School of Art and Design, and then he soon relocated to New York, where he studied at the Art Students League. He remained in the United States until his death, and while he is most known for his paintings, the artist had a large amount of sketches unknown to the main public, and those will be the main body or the main focus of this research presentation. By looking at his early work and the inspiration around him, we can deduce that the artist is capable of incorporating humor into his pieces, but his lack of doing so, coupled with the emotional state of his works, reveals his true feelings of his political and personal identity towards the Japanese during the Second World War. In this self-portrait, Yasuo Kuniyoshi paints himself in a fashionable golf uniform. The background of this painting is characterized by this blurry brown kind of background and the abstracted kind of golf range. This kind of folk-inspired imagery is unique and iconic to Kuniyoshi's art style, and the way that he depicts himself is in a strangely proportioned, like off-centered, like a gentleman kind of posing on his estate. Golf at this point is a very uniquely Anglo-American sport, and in the 1920s became a middle-class leisure sport. This painting is a testament to how strongly he wanted to portray himself as a Western and as an American.
Oh, sorry, just click the button because I was doing a meeting control. Sorry about that.
In Yasuo Kuniyoshi's early works, like Little Joe the Cow, Kuniyoshi's distinct style is extremely recognizable. This painting is actually one of my favorites, and it's the initial reason to why I got so interested in his body of works. In this background of the painting, the land is abstracted with the inconsistent proportions of the land and the flowers and just the background. The spatial compression of this painting with the house in the back gives the viewers no clear indication of how close or far the boy is, and is actually kind of reminds of like a dream. The mirage-like quality of this painting suggests that this might be even like a memory of Little Joe. The cow motif in this painting repeats often throughout Kuniyoshi's body of work and becomes one of his most defining symbols. Yasuo Kuniyoshi is born in the year of the cow and felt very closely with the animal. In traditional and American folk art, cows come to represent land, cultivation, and wealth. Kuniyoshi would have well known this and attributed to the image of the cow to Old English imagery. Eventually, the image of the cow would also remind the artist of specifically American imagery. In the 1920s, when this painting was made, the artist would have been surrounded by advertisements for dairy products. As the dairy industry in America was modernizing the technology, they were simultaneously trying to advertise their products, and they're trying to advertise the importance of milk and cheese. They advertised towards healthy children and families, and Kuniyoshi would have seen many of these advertisements as they were so pervasive in American culture at the time. Kuniyoshi clearly had an interest in exploring aspects of American identity and pride, especially through these icons like the cow. Little Joe with the Cow is a painting that combines so many aspects of American identity. Kuniyoshi's feelings of appreciation for the United States was contested by the involvement of the United States during the Second World War. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Kuniyoshi was faced with the threat of being put into an internment camp or being sent back to Japan, along with other Japanese immigrants at the time. Kuniyoshi fortunately was well connected, so he was able to escape that path, but he was still placed under house arrest and questioned in his home and searched by the FBI. As political tensions grew in the United States towards the Japanese communities, Kuniyoshi found himself in a position of constantly trying to having to prove himself as an American. In a letter to a fellow artist friend, he wrote about how much his status and feeling proud as American hasn't changed, even though he was nationally denounced as such. In this letter, he wrote to the Dallas Museum of Art to gather proof of his profession as an American artist because he wanted to be able to prove himself as an American just in case he were to run into the law again. During the Second World War, Kuniyoshi started to make more propaganda art, and to the outside world, he's very proud to be anti-Japanese, and he claimed it loudly, but in private, he was very much more conflicted. In his career, he submitted over a dozen prints to the Office of War Information to be published, and because Yasuo Kuniyoshi's Japanese status had become the forefront of his existence, his art kind of became a point of expression for his frustrations. You see that in this piece, had this horse who wants to jump. This painting was painted after the war ended, and is a scene of a broken horse carousel that has been turned upside down. It's kind of hard to see, but this iconography is indicative of the confusion that Kuniyoshi felt post-war. And similar to the title of the painting, The Horse That Wants to Jump, Kuniyoshi, we know that Kuniyoshi wants to be recognized as an American, but struggled his entire life with it. Coming out of the war, the persistent racism towards Asians and other immigrants prevented him to get citizenship until his death. And this painting is a testament to the conflict that Kuniyoshi felt during his life, especially during the war. In this first propaganda piece that you see here, an art installation made for the Art Students League, Three Good Hates, you see that he paints a caricature of Japanese Emperor Hirohito in a style that is common to propaganda illustrations of the Japanese. You can see that the caricature has big teeth and slit eyes. This piece was made along with other artists, George Gross and John Gorbino, who also made their own caricatures of Hitler and Mussolini. Both artists are also German and Italian born, respectively. While this installation might have been the most outwardly racist and anti-Japanese, the rest of Kuniyoshi's propaganda art is much more discreet. Kuniyoshi's friend, Archibald McBleish, who was an assistant director for the Office of War Information at the time, advised Kuniyoshi to join this team of artists designing propaganda posters, and it would be including other artists such as Howard Brody and McGlenn Barclay. Kuniyoshi quickly would have realized that he would have gotten official approval from the government from publishing propaganda posters, and therefore he started to make proposals for these prints. At this point in his career, the artist was working in New York City, but in 1930, Kuniyoshi moved to Woodstock, New York, where he had his home and studio. This first poster is the first one that he turns into the Office of War Information. This one was rejected, however, for being too theatric and not journalistic enough. The style of the sketch is similar to the traditional depiction of samurais, and the armor as well as the ancient clothing was not the reality of contemporary wartime soldiers. This image, however, reveals that the artist's interest and appreciation of folk art and folklore is very apparent. After the rejection of this poster, however, Kuniyoshi was forced to make images that were a little closer to the reality of the soldiers on the front line. This is another example that shows Kuniyoshi's appreciation for folk art. He visited Japan in 1931 and brought back souvenirs, which are the subject of this painting. And the image on the right is just an example of what the toys might have looked like. And the second example on the right, this is actually a painting made of the same objects but by his first wife. And this painting, that painting on the right, was made just as they were having marriage trouble. So it's kind of interesting to see the realism and realistic take that she takes, and like how there's two, and there's one, and they're like, yeah, team. In this sketches for his propaganda prints that he makes over his life, there's an obvious kind of ambivalent heartfulness for his people and his birthland. Torture is one of Kuniyoshi's most infamous prints. In this poster, like many other sketches that he made, he focuses on militarism rather than racist caricatures. The use of language in this poster is similar to other posters of the same period, as we see. And this poster was aimed to foster fear about the terrible brutalities done by the Nazi regime. By highlighting the atrocities of war, both of these posters convey horror caused by the enemy military. Because Kuniyoshi only focuses on inhumanity, he successfully found a way to appeal to the American government, who are trying to push these kind of anti-Japanese sentiments, but also while appealing towards his progressive and modernist friends. Kuniyoshi's sole focus on the devastation of war reflects his own conflicting feelings towards the disparity between his identity and his Americanness. Bombed Out depicts a woman kneeling over in anguish over the ruins of war. Unlike the racist caricatures that depict Japanese people with large and dark teeth, small eyes, etc., this image shows an average citizen that is affected by the war. Kuniyoshi brings a sense of humanitarianism to these images that is quite opposite to the kinds of images that the Office of War Information had been putting out at the time, as we see. Comparing these two images, there's no humor or ridicule utilized by Kuniyoshi, unlike the poster on the right that is very sarcastic. There's only a real sense of grief and heartbreak in the drawing by Kuniyoshi. Seeing his earlier works, Kuniyoshi is capable of bringing humor into his works, but he purposely chooses not to, and we see that in this example. We know that Kuniyoshi is capable of incorporating humor, like this painting, Strong Woman and Child. The woman in this painting is a circus performer, and as she stands on the stage with her child, she looks confident and protective almost of her son. Her humorous and lighthearted career opposes the kind of sinister and dark themes in the landscape and the style, which kind of makes this painting very alluring and captivating. The unexplainable darkness and the subtle absurdity and the comicalness of this image is opposite to the sketches that he made about the war. Unlike this one, where the Tojo, very happy, pokes fun at Asian accent and has a very high level of sarcastic irony in the text. Again, there's no humor in this work on the left. In another sketch, Killer, a soldier is about to bayonet a kneeling and pleading citizen. The soldier stands over and on top of a group of already killed people. I don't know if you can see the legs pointing out. And he approaches the final person without remorse. The Japanese flag that is attached to his weapon is a reminder to the audience of the inhumane practices of the Japanese military. This scene, upon close inspection, is one that highlights the atrocities of the Japanese military and is trying to elicit fear towards those people. This is a call towards the audience, or specifically able-bodied men, to make Japan take responsibility for their war crimes. As I mentioned earlier, Yasuo Kuniyoshi was working next to other military artists for the Second World War, one of those artists being Taro Yashima, the one on the right. Tarishima is a pseudonym for Atsushi Awamatsu, who was a Japanese artist that moved to the US right before the Second World War in order to escape the Japanese government. He was an outspoken activist against the government, and him and his wife were already jailed before deciding to run. When he came to the US, he joined the military after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and he worked as an artist for the Office of Strategic Strategies. This one on the right is actually a leaflet that was dropped over the Japanese military in Guam. This was a technique used by the US military where they would drop propaganda over smaller Japanese towns and islands in order to sway the people to distrust the military and government. This leaflet over there has a story about a soldier who feels defeated because he was supposed to be serving his army or serving his country, but instead he feels like he's doing the dirty work for higher up soldiers who simply steal, use geisha girls, sell opium, pay taxes, and overall just grow richer and just more corrupt. The storytelling utilized in this print is similar to the storytelling using in this left image, and Kuniyoshi utilizes this aspect in order to convey the corruptness of Japanese militarism. One of Kuniyoshi's most disturbing images is this drawing of a baby that is being thrown into the air, about to land onto a sea of bayonets, and again, the Japanese flag. This again shows a senseless and corrupt atrocity that furthermore emphasizes the cruelty of the Japanese military. Another artist that Kuniyoshi worked along was Howard Brody, who was famous specifically for his sketches. Howard Brody spent largely his time doing combat sketches on the field, but he did live in New York. Brody did combat sketches as well as courtroom sketches later on in his career, and he was a courtroom artist for many famous cases, including Charles Manson. There's an uncanny kind of parallel in these two images, and the image on the left shows a woman, possibly a mother, being hanged while a baby being hanged on the left. These two examples show the similarity between the Kuniyoshi and Brody's, as they're both highlighting the heinousness of war. Brody makes a ton of those kind of images, and it would be no surprise if Kuniyoshi saw these and took inspiration for his own sketches. An interesting aspect to all of these images is the fact that one is unable to see the faces of these people clearly. Yasuo Kuniyoshi deliberately hides the faces of his subjects, and in this way he's both avoiding having to figure out how to depict faces without using racist caricatures, but also without contending with showing faces ruined by the war. Minimizing the subject in his drawings to bodies or victims supports his efforts to condemn the Japanese military without having to think about how to represent the people. In Beheading, however, a man faces the viewer unlike any of the other prints we studied, and he kneels as he is about to be slayed by the Japanese soldier. He looks directly at the audience, almost as if he knows that, or almost as if he's judging the audience for not saving him. His furrowed kind of expression invokes a helplessness feeling in the viewer, and Yasuo Kuniyoshi purposely does this to emphasize again the horrendous acts committed by the Japanese military, further pushing his anti-Japanese agenda. Yasuo Kuniyoshi, who is most known for his surreal and off-putting folk-inspired paintings, reveals an even darker, profound side to his artistry. Although Kuniyoshi is capable of incorporating humor into his pieces, his lack of doing so, coupled with the emotional state of his works, shows his tenaciousness with his identity, politics, and humanity. Kuniyoshi, through his sketches and posters, aims to foster fear and shock towards the war. By highlighting specifically the atrocities of the Japanese military, he successfully finds a way to appeal to the American government while also maintaining a sense of empathy for the people of his homeland. Thank you so much for listening, and I will open
Questions for Ruth?
What's your impression of what drawings like this one on the left were for? Were they personal? Were they meant to be sent to the government as ideas of things that could be done in a propaganda program?
Yeah, so he made these sketches as kind of just like working to make prints. So these were never published. These are actually in archives currently. But I do believe that they were either sent to the office to be looked at first, or they were just made in his own time, and then he personally picked which one got to be published. I think the only one that might have gone published was this one.
It's striking that this one was just, that could be any enemy.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just stripped of any kind of ethnic
Right.
specificity.
It is kind of like the most, I don't wanna say basic, but it is basic out of all of them.
And symbols. It doesn't include like a Nazi symbol,
Right.
a swastika or, flag.
I was so interested, Rue, in the one where he's the three really gross, the German, the Italian, and
Oh.
the Japanese, and that was George Gross and
Yes.
who was in an Italian.
George Gross and John Rubino, I believe.
So they're three emigre representatives
Yes.
of the enemy.
Yeah, and they made this installation at an art school. So it's supposed to inspire the students there, and influence kind of like the arts that's coming out, so it's really very telling.
Thank you, Rue. It's so fun to see this, it makes a difference actually seeing this kind of blown up like this. And I'm interested in, you talked about, he has interests in militarism as a topic versus caricature, right? So he's sort of, the world of caricature is being favored for these political posters in the US, right? And he wants to show this more militaristic side of things, right? And he's showing this kind of gore and grief that he's processing and working through, right? And I love that you focus on the body of work that actually doesn't get produced into anything, because it shows us
Right.
how he's thinking as an artist, right? Do you have any evidence that that material was rejected? That the sketches that you,
I only have evidence that this one is rejected, but
Okay.
specifically because it is too theatrical and it's
Yeah.
like ancient clothing, like that. It isn't modern. I don't have evidence that the other ones are rejected per se, but the fact that they weren't published kind of tells me that they probably weren't published or they were rejected. Which I would understand because, I mean, everything that was being published at the time looked like the one on the right,
right?
or the one like that, or even, like these ones, these sketches. And those sketches are based off of real experience because that artist was on the field and was, witnessing all this. I think maybe because Kunyoshi was more like imagining things from the imagination and kind of like figuring things out for himself, they weren't as like, popular with The Office.
I wonder what the parallel is here with newspaper photos, newspaper reports, because this was a frequently reported, these kind of beheadings in the Japanese army.
Yeah, I don't really have, sources of what the news looked like then, but I imagine that it's not pretty.
The composition of the one on the right is so classical, kind of pyramidal grouping.
Yeah.
It's
It looks like a war memorial, right? Yeah.
He has a lot of art, Howard Buddy has a lot of these kind of sketches, and they're actually like for sale on his, like, there's a website that sells them, like the original ones. So, those are really interesting to look through. But they're very like neoclassic, just like the piles of bodies of soldiers like hugging each other and stuff like that. Yes?
Go show the woman hanging in there, the other depiction. So what I noticed is that women's wearing a clothes that resembles Chinese people, or certainly I guess he heard about the news or know what's going on there. He wasn't there, but he actually heard the news and out of imagery or things that he actually portrayed.
Right, this definitely could have been based on a specific event.
Yeah.
Or, cause the Japanese were kind of just, killing large amounts of people, so this definitely could have been like an ethnic group. It's interesting that you noticed that, I didn't notice that earlier, but yeah, definitely. Yes?
So I was wondering, do you know if he was like highly regarded or well known in Japan? Like how did the Japanese population build?
Oh, good question, yeah.
I don't think that he was well known. I mean, he only visited once after he moved out, and that was with his wife, I think, and then he never went back after that. And then he even said, like, when he visited, he felt so removed from like his hometown, like it didn't feel familiar anymore. So I definitely don't think that he really was in contact with Japan or specifically Japanese artists. I knew that he was well connected in New York and within his own circle of friends. And he was also a collector of folk art, so I think he was very well connected to folk art collectors and artists. So, yeah. Yes.
I don't have questions, I just have comments, and thank you for making this so fun to listen to. Because last time we met, we're having dinner and she was still trying to figure out what's the right angle to write this thesis, and then now to see it in form is just really fun, and also that I see so much humanitarianism in the art, and I think Ru did a good job in connecting with the artists and really tell the stories behind the art, so I appreciate it, thank you.
And I love the tiger
Yeah.
painting with
The tea with his wife.
yeah.
Yeah.
His ex-wife.
That's
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?